really proud of our rural microtransit initiative that we applied for and received funding for 2 rural microtransit projects. In both cases, we worked with them to develop a concept of converting or supplementing some of their existing fixed route or deviated fixed route service with microtransit. It's been so successful now, we're looking at how we can do some statewide contracting to help support more implementation by other transit agencies.
This is Transit Unplugged. I'm Paul Comfort. Good to be with you on another edition of the world's leading transit executive podcast, Transit Unplugged In-Depth, this week with Jennifer DeBruhl, who is director of the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us today on the podcast.
Paul, it's great to be here.
Let's just jump right in. Tell us about your department. What do you all do?
So the Department of Rail and Public Transportation here in Virginia, we're a standalone state agency that is focused on transit and rail, reporting to the Secretary of Transportation and with a director appointed by the governor. So we have, an equivalent stature to the Highway Agency, the Department of Aviation, the ports, and the other modal agencies within transportation here in Virginia.
Sounds very similar to Maryland, where I came from. Similar
in many ways to Maryland. Our program here, DRPT, we have about $1 billion budget for fiscal year 23. The majority of that is on the transit side in terms of state funding for capital and operating that we provide to 40 transit agencies and also provide a significant amount of support for WMATA. We do statewide rail planning. We have some freight rail programs that we fund, improvements on the freight rail side. And then I also have the pleasure of serving as the chair of the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority Board, which is overseeing Virginia's passenger rail investments and the implementation of a major program of projects, which is going to expand passenger rail in Virginia exponentially, including the construction of a brand new long bridge between Virginia and the District of Columbia.
So your department itself, it sounds like you do a lot of funding and regulation and oversight and planning, but you also have some direct operations, right?
We do. We have, through the FTA 5311F intercity bus program, we have a very robust intercity bus initiative here. We call it the Virginia Breeze, and that is overseen directly and managed directly by DRPT with a contracted operator. We run 4 lines with daily service through the central and western parts of the Commonwealth.
That's awesome. And then how are you doing generally, would you say, not only with the Breeze, but your other services that you fund, pandemic recovery ridership wise? Here we sit, at the end of September.
So ridership, I'll tell you, the last couple of years have been very challenging. And I'm excited that, we've put a lot of emphasis here in Virginia on, rebuilding the confidence of the public in our systems coming out of a pandemic. We've seen our ridership we'll start with Virginia Breeze. The ridership on the Virginia Breeze is back above pre-pandemic levels. So
really? Wow, that's awesome.
Yes. And so we really actively manage that system, and we're able to add additional buses and runs to days where we have demand. And so we are seeing demand that exceeds those, one motor coach run in certain directions and peak travel times. So that is very promising. Our Amtrak ridership is above pre-pandemic levels as well for our intercity service that runs here through the Commonwealth and up into the Northeast Corridor. On the transit agency side, statewide, if you pull out WMATA and you pull out the Virginia Railway Express, the other transit systems in the state, we have several that are above pre-pandemic levels. And just generally speaking, we're probably 75% of pre-pandemic if you just look at those groups statewide. And we are seeing rebounds now in WMATA and BRE, although those commuter-based operations in Northern Virginia seem to be the ones that are coming back the slowest.
Yeah, I'm hearing from people like in cities like New York, Washington, D.C., others, San Francisco, that no, not so much San Francisco because they're still really having real low ridership in many areas, but that it's turning into a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday city. Are you hearing any or feeling that from your ridership?
We are definitely hearing that. We get ridership data from all of the transit systems in the Commonwealth submitted to us on a monthly basis. We share those on an open data portal that's available to the public because we allocate a lot of our funding based on performance. So those ridership stats are are really important to us and how we actively manage our program. So we're monitoring that all the time. And I think that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is definitely a reality. I think the other thing that we see is, the traditional peak period of I get on the bus at 8, to get to the office at 8 a.m. and then I
Right.
get back on the bus to come home after 5 o'clock. Those more traditional work hours seem to have faded away as well. And so you see commuters that are looking for more flexibility, they're looking for more midday service. And instead of, more frequency in the peak periods, the systems that seem to be spreading that commuter-based operation out over the course of the day so that somebody could go into the office, say, to be there for a 10 o'clock meeting and maybe come home mid-afternoon and be there in time to get their kids off the bus, seems to be more of the norm than what we've seen in the past. So definitely some different commuting patterns. But yes, I would say a Friday AM commute would probably be the lightest thing that we see these days. But the Friday evening, definitely more ridership when people are ready to get out and get to, destinations. So definitely have to look at more than just how people travel to get to work. It's how do they travel to get to other destinations as well.
That's interesting. Yeah. And so you provide funding through a lot of these agencies. Are you the funnel through which the federal formula funds flow to your Commonwealth's, smaller transit agencies?
Yes. So all of the rural and the human service, the 5311, 5310, all comes to us to coordinate with those smaller agencies.
I gotcha. That's interesting. And then what's your involvement with WMATA, Washington Metro? We just had Suhair Al-Khatib on this week, who is a safety commissioner for WMATA from Maryland. What's your interaction with them?
So the current WMATA board chair, Paul Smedberg, was appointed by the previous Secretary of Transportation here in Virginia. So he is the Commonwealth's appointee to serve on the WMATA board. The Commonwealth does provide, so we support Paul, and we work with Paul and have a great relationship with Paul. We do provide a significant amount of funding that goes, some of which goes directly to WMATA for dedicated capital, focusing on state of good repair projects. It was part of a $500 million package that was passed back in 2018.
I remember that.
Yeah, remember that one. So we have $154 million a year that goes into that. We send about $200 million a year to the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission to help offset the subsidies for the Northern Virginia funding jurisdictions of WMATA, so Fairfax County, Loudoun, and others. And then we provide a $50 million match towards the $150 million in PREA that WMATA gets every year. So it's about a little over $400 million a year that goes to WMATA. So we're engaged with them on a variety of things, not just funding, but we're involved in studies that they're working on, like the Blue, Orange, Silver capacity study, the bus transformation project. So we work with them on a technical side as well. Again, looking out for the interests of the Commonwealth.
That's good. Yeah, Randy Clark, I think is at least elbow deep now in all the work there as CEO.
He is met with him a couple of weeks ago, along with the secretary, and just really excited to have Randy on board, and look forward to working with him into the future.
Yeah, he's a great guy. A really good win for the region having him up here. Tell us some about what's happening with passenger rail right now. I know you are involved in the Virginia statewide rail plan, but you're deeply involved in the rail programs of the region.
Yeah, so I'll start with the rail plan. We have a Federal Railroad Administration requirement to do a rail plan periodically. We're in that cycle right now. So we're working on an update to our statewide rail plan. That rail plan becomes a springboard to a lot of things. In the past, we've put a lot of effort into that rail plan to really look strategically at expanding passenger rail in the Commonwealth, which I'll talk about in a minute. But this particular rail plan, since that passenger rail program has really matured, is focused more on being much more strategic in our investments and our plans for freight rail and how we can support the Port of Virginia in terms of economic competitiveness and business growth in the Commonwealth. So that plan we're wrapping up and hope to get finished by the end of the year. On going back to passenger rail, back in 2019, then Governor Northam, a big announcement of a landmark agreement with CSX. The Commonwealth acquired a significant amount of rail right-of-way in the I-95 corridor, along with some other elements of rail in the Commonwealth. and an agreement for the Commonwealth to construct a parallel passenger rail only long bridge crossing the Potomac from Virginia into Maryland, really unlocking that capacity constraint that the long bridge has been for quite some time. So that announcement in 2019 kicked off a number of legislative activities and development of a full complement of projects that we refer to as Transforming Rail in Virginia. So following that, in 2020, the Virginia legislature established the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, which was birthed out of the Department of Rail and Public Transportation to be an independent authority to own those assets, to take care of them, to implement the vision of transforming rail in Virginia, and to deliver that big capital program, and then to be the operating arm of the rail passenger rail service itself in the Commonwealth. So we spent the last couple of years getting the Passenger Rail Authority stood up, very robust program of projects, about $4 billion worth of capital work, not only in the I-95 corridor with Long Bridge, but in the addition of third and fourth track focused on passenger service, station improvements, sidings all the way down here to Richmond. We also acquired the S line between Petersburg and North Carolina, which then will serve as we work to cooperatively develop that piece of rail right-of-way with North Carolina DOT. That unlocks more access for North Carolina coming out of Raleigh and Charlotte into the Northeast corridor. Along with those projects, we also have an expansion of rail from Roanoke out in the I-81 corridor in Western Virginia over to the New River Valley, which extends passenger rail service back into Blacksburg, Christiansburg, where Virginia Tech is. Really excited about that whole program of projects that's underway. And so VPRA takes the lead on those. We're continuing to look at further expansion of passenger rail beyond even those projects in Virginia. Here as part of our planning efforts at DRPT, we're working on potential extension of that New River Valley run on down through Bristol into Tennessee. We're working with Tennessee DOT on potential connections either into Knoxville or Knoxville, Chattanooga, or over towards Nashville. Having those conversations, and we've done at least a preliminary study about an east-west connection, which would connect Hampton Roads to Roanoke and give us some more rail connections across the Commonwealth. Right now, everything kind of goes up to DC, so there's not a good cross-Commonwealth corridor. So we have a good complement of projects that are in the implementation pipeline, and I would say an equally good complement of projects that will be kind of the next phase as we get that first big tranche of projects.
Yeah, that's very exciting to hear all the new rail. I mean, that's not happening in a lot of places. So congratulations.
Yeah, very exciting. We take the wins and celebrate them as they come. This summer, we launched a second daily trip from Roanoke, and that has done extraordinarily well. And the third daily trip coming out of Norfolk and Hampton Roads. And we have seen some of the, not only are we back above pre-pandemic ridership on the Virginia Amtrak runs, but we've had some of our, check my stats real quick, but we've had just this week some of the highest numbers we've ever seen on passenger rail here in the Commonwealth. Our August ridership set a new record for ridership, and it was 23% higher than the previous August record, which was August of 2019. So
breaking news right here today. That's amazing.
Breaking news.
What's the name of the rail service when you say
it's all Amtrak? So
okay.
Our partner, Amtrak's our partner, but these are Virginia sponsored, state sponsored, and state funded
like inner-city routes.
Inner city. So you get on the train here in Richmond or in Norfolk, those routes are going to leave Virginia going across the Long Bridge into the district, and then they join the Northeast corridor and they go to New York, they go to Boston.
Yes. Would they have to get off at Union Station and get on another train perhaps?
No. So they go through, there's a delay at Union Station to switch locomotive from diesel coming out of Virginia to electric. Ultimately, we're looking at a dual mode locomotive so that we'll eliminate that dwell time or reduce that dwell time in DC. So the next round of capital upgrades for Amtrak will hopefully make that better for all of us. But
I know when I was at MTA in Baltimore, we ran the MARC train service, which was commuter trains under contract with Bombardier and Amtrak, and they would all go into Union Station. And I had a lot of connection with Virginia Railway Express, but I don't remember if you could actually connect. And, I don't think we could back then. Has anything happened along those lines?
No, I mean, so if you take Virginia Railway Express out of Virginia, you're going to go to DC, and that's going to be your terminal point. The same with MARC, coming from Maryland to Union Station. The Long Bridge does unlock capacity that doesn't exist today for potential run-through service. There have been a number of studies done of potential run-through service. So as we kind of get down the road, get Long Bridge constructed, I mean, certainly that's something that would not have previously been able to happen, that will become the potential when we get Long Bridge completed in 2030.
And is there a date when we're looking at getting the Long Bridge complete?
2030.
2030. Okay. Very good.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of Transit Unplugged, the podcast. How would you like to see behind-the-scenes footage of the agencies that Paul visits? Then be sure to check out the new Transit Unplugged TV on YouTube, where transit evangelist Paul Comfort dives into the culture, the food, and the transit of major cities around the world. You'll see the operations control centers, how maintenance shops work, and the latest innovations taking place at agencies around the globe as we work together to improve the lives of our transit riders and our communities. Be sure to subscribe to Transit Unplugged TV on YouTube or at transitunplugged.com.
And tell us about some of the innovations you've got going on there. I know that's a big thing in your mind, is leading those innovations for transit in Virginia.
It is. And I think one of the big value propositions we bring to the transit community in Virginia is the ability to help drive innovation and to, help, particularly with some of the smaller rural systems, help them try some things that, and develop some ideas that they may not have had the internal capacity to do. We're really proud of our rural microtransit initiative that we applied for FTA's IMI program, and were successful and received funding for 2 rural microtransit projects. One is in the far southwest portion of Virginia, in an area it's called Wise. It's home to the University of Virginia Wise. And then the other one is in Gloucester County, which is over near the Chesapeake Bay, again, and a kind of a rural cusp kind of community. In both cases, we worked with them to develop a concept of converting or supplementing some of their existing fixed route or deviated fixed route service with microtransit. These have been some incredibly successful pilot projects, not only in terms of making the service more efficient, but better meeting the needs of the community. And putting, some of the things that we worried about was access to technology and use of cell phones for people to book trips has not been an issue, even with, with elderly populations, even with, areas that may not have as great access to cell service. Both of those pilots have been very cost effective because both transit agencies used vehicles and operators that they already had on staff. And really what we did and what we brought in to work with them is some service design and contracting for the technology. It's been so successful now. We're looking at how we can do some statewide contracting to help support more implementation by other transit agencies. So that's been a real good one. And then we have our Transportation Navigator, which is our statewide one-click center for information on all of Virginia's transit and human service agencies, all in one place, driven by, GTFS data. That's, we basically developed a statewide GTFS platform for everybody. And that information is now in the hands of the public through a widget that goes out through our human service agencies. It's on Google Maps. It's on our website. It's on our transit agency partner websites. And that's a program we've won a number of technology and innovation awards for. That we're grateful that was also funded by FTA through a discretionary grant. And they've given us another grant to expand that and really try to make all of the services that are available in Virginia much more accessible.
Yeah. So then people can see exactly where their vehicle is, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
That's the end goal. Yes.
Yeah. And on the human service side of transportation, are you involved in that as well?
We manage the 5310 program for all of Virginia except for Northern Virginia, which is done regionally with the Council of Governments. So we manage the 5310 program. We do statewide planning for coordinated human service transportation services, and we lead a state roundtable with our state agency partners, the health, human service, veterans organizations. We meet with them on a quarterly basis to collaborate on projects.
That's great. And how did you end up in this role, Jennifer? I mean, you spent a lot of time in Virginia agencies, but give us a little bit of the history of how you kind of the winding road that led you to this role.
Oh, that's a great question, Paul. So I've worked in transportation in Virginia for 30 years. I started out right out of college and went to work for the Virginia Department of Transportation. I was in traffic engineering and transportation planning. Early on, left VDOT and actually went to work for the US DOT, for the Federal Highway Administration here in Richmond, and worked for them for about 5 years doing planning and some finance and some environmental type work. Really kind of started expanding my horizons. Ended up going back to VDOT because I didn't want to move away from Virginia, and I ended up in some cutting edge programs. It was developing partnerships with local government. I worked on a lot of trails and train stations, and not your typical highway program stuff. And it was all about partnership. Went from there, ended up being a deputy district administrator in the field for VDOT for a while, operations, maintenance, engineering, construction, overseeing all kinds of things on the highway side, which led me here, ironically, because there's a lovely BRT project right here in Richmond that's been wildly successful, the Pulse.
Yeah, Julie Thomas told me about that.
Julie's amazing. So the Pulse BRT project had some time frames. GRTC had received a Tiger grant to construct that project. DRPT had done all of the preliminary work, the NEPA work, the planning, and everything. So there was already kind of this regional partnership between the state and GRTC on delivering that project. VDOT has a lot of experience doing design build infrastructure projects. And so got a phone call and got an opportunity to work on the Pulse BRT project and getting that design build procured and getting that great asset constructed here in Richmond. That, interestingly enough, led into there was a vacancy here at DRPT, and I ended up coming here while the Pulse was under construction. I ended up joining DRPT as the chief of public transportation and getting to oversee DRPT's role in bringing that project to fruition. So the Pulse really got me to here, and then I spent 6 years here as the chief of public transportation. I got to work on the Pulse. I got to work on some WMATA evaluation that we did with Secretary Ray LaHood, former US DOT Secretary Ray LaHood, looking at WMATA, doing some transit capital program redesign here in terms of prioritization and our performance-based methodologies, and was fully prepared to retire and walk away when Governor Youngkin and Secretary Miller asked me to stay and become the director after Jennifer Mitchell went on to the Federal Railroad Administration. So this was not, I say this about every step along the way, it was not what I had set out to do maybe or intended to do, but I think everything comes together for a reason. And I consider myself truly blessed to be able to lead this organization into the future. And I have a wonderful team and great partners around the Commonwealth, and just want to do the best I can for all of them every day.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Jennifer. What a great story, and inspirational, I think, to people about how you can maneuver your career if you have your eyes wide open and you're prepared. Like you probably believe, like I do. I don't believe in luck per se. I think you're prepared when opportunity strikes.
Yes, and some of those opportunities, there are plenty of people that opportunities come up and it may not have been what they had in mind. And I think sometimes taking those those pivots or curveballs that are thrown your way and taking advantage of those when it may be something that would typically be seen as out of your lane, and taking a chance that has paid off well for me through my career. And just very proud of what we've been able to accomplish here in Virginia, and proud of the work we do here at DRPT.
Yeah, you've got your plate full. I mean, there's so many projects going on. I don't know how you keep track of them all. I guess you have to have a good Excel spreadsheet. Huh?
I have a great team here and a great team at the Passenger Rail Authority. So
there you go. Thanks again, Jennifer, for being our guest today.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Transit Unplugged In-Depth with our special guest, Jennifer DeBruhl, Director of the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. Now, next week is a really special episode. Not only is it the start of Season 6 and our 5th anniversary, it is also the 225th episode of Transit Unplugged. So to celebrate, we have none other than Rich Davey, President of New York City Transit at New York MTA, that Paul recorded live from the Vontas booth at APTAtransform. We're all really looking forward to this episode. Be sure not to miss it. Do you know how not to miss it? Go to transitunplugged.com and sign up for the newsletter so you always know what's going on with Transit Unplugged, the podcast, and the TV show. If you have a question, comment, or would like to be a guest on Transit Unplugged, feel free to email us at info@transitunplugged.com. So until next week, ride safe and ride happy.